Hello, and welcome to Nature Night with Michael Runtz, presented by the Parks Canada Outdoors Club of Carleton. Please note that this event is being recorded. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Nata, and this is my co-host Adib. We're so happy to have Runtz come talk to us about his experiences in the outdoors. For those that don't know, Runtz is a well-known naturalist, nature photographer, writer, and Carleton lecturer. He teaches the popular Bio 1902, 2903, and 4500 classes here at Carleton. Runtz is going to give a talk for the next 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end and a draw to win a copy of his book, Algonquin Wild, so stick around for that. We encourage everyone to take a break from technology and just listen to some amazing nature stories. Without further ado, I'll pass it on to Michael.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm happy to be here because I almost didn't make it here due to this injury that set me back a little bit, but here I am. And in reading what you would like me to speak about, it was some of my nature experiences, why we should look at birds, why we should be in the outdoors, how to photograph nature. Each of those would be a 2-hour talk in itself. So I'm trying to do all those components into 40 minutes. So forgive me if I go past it a little bit, but I'll give you a condensed version of all those fascinating topics. Okay, I guess I share my screen now. And am I already doing this? Okay, and let's just see. Okay, I'm hoping, is that coming through as a, can anybody, there, is that visible to you?
Not yet.
Oh, why?
We're still waiting for it.
Oh, that's okay. That's interesting. Go back to where we are. I'm sharing screen. Okay, maybe that's why. Okay, try this then.
There we go.
Are we now live? Okay,
We are
good.
live. All
Okay,
yours.
so you can see the first image, okay? Excellent, okay. So
Yes.
I titled this Why I or We Look at Birds. So a little bit of background first. I began looking at nature when I was very young, and I was taken to Algonquin Park by my parents to feed a white-tailed deer that were common on the roadside. And maybe that's how I got this injury, who knows? But maybe deer bit my hand off, no. But at the age of 5, I began looking at birds, but I was actually forced into it. Apparently, I didn't know the story, by the way, until I was in my late 20s, but I would go next door to where my sister, who was 9 or 10, had a friend same age and a playhouse. And apparently, according to the girl's mother, I used to bother those young girls. I find that hard to believe, but I used to pester them and throw their teapots and things outside. And so to distract me, they called the mother to lead me around the yard and show me birds. She was an amateur bird watcher. And I can remember vividly at the age of 5, looking through binoculars, and seeing Baltimore Orioles in the yard. And that just captured my attention. And I began looking at birds after the age of 5. And by the age of 6, I was actually identifying birds for various bird books. So it's been a long association. And certainly one of the reasons I look at birds, and you should look at birds if you don't already, is that they are incredibly beautiful organisms. And certainly it was the colors of birds. And by the way, at the end, whoever identifies most species shown in these photographs will win a prize. Whoever can name them all gets a huge prize. But anyway, I'm just joking. Certainly the colors of birds are one reason I was drawn to them, and we should look at them, because the colors cover the entire spectrum of color. Spectacular organisms. And of course, birds are animated. They move, they fly, and seeing these animals, and especially for someone like me as a kid with ADD, where your mind jumps all around, to have an organism that also jumps around is an obvious way to direct your attention. And I think for any kid with ADD or ADHD or whatever they call those syndromes, they're not a curse or a disease. They're a blessing. It allows your mind to work quickly in different avenues. And nature is the perfect way of directing those wild thoughts into something useful. And I think anybody with ADD should be off those pills and taken into nature. because nature certainly is animated, and birds in particular, of course, because they fly, they move around. And nothing more spectacular than seeing these birds. And also they vocalize, and the world of sound out there is also captivating. And of course, all their behaviors. They do everything from sing, of course, to look for food. They forage, they raise young. There's so many aspects to their biology that grabs our attention. And they interact with each other, with other species. I love this moment. There's a deer carcass and there are scavengers here, and this bald eagle seems to be directing his minions, to go away or come and feast. And they interact with other animals of different classes. So here's a cattle egret that was down near Brighton, near Presqu'île, Lake Ontario, picking flies off a cow's eyes, and the cow doesn't mind, it's being groomed. This interest in birds was really a passion, and it allowed me to get a job in Algonquin Park as a naturalist in the early 1970s. And of course, that's me in the bow of the canoe. This young fellow here, Bill Crins, has just retired from natural resources. He was an ecologist planner with them for many years and a world expert on sedges. And in the back is Ron Tozer, who retired from Algonquin Park as naturalist, a full-time naturalist, a number of years ago. And he wrote the most incredible book on birds, The Birds of Algonquin Park. So here's two esteemed people with me in the bow of the canoe. This love of birds has put me on many adventures and many incredible opportunities, from looking at peregrine falcons in 1985 that led me to Hudson Bay, to the tundra, to doing 2-month surveys in the boreal forest by canoe, to going to Jasper National Park to do some work there on moose and so on. And so this passion became much more than a hobby and became a lifetime obsession. And yeah, I mentioned 85, I was doing peregrine falcon surveys, and that was across Ontario. Best job you can imagine for 3 months, where I alone was either canoeing in lakes or being dropped off by helicopter or being in tugboats on Lake Superior looking for peregrine falcon nests. In the boreal forest for 2 months in parks where there were no roads, where you had to be flown in and dropped off by float plane, with Doug Tozer, who now has a research job with Bird Studies Canada as a wetland expert. To up in the breeding bird survey I was doing in this northern river, the Mukatai, that flows into the Attawapiskat, and did, I think, 100 and I forget how many kilometers, 130 kilometers by canoe through this beautiful northern Hudson Bay lowland to the Hudson Bay coastline, doing bird surveys there in more recent times, and to Jasper National Park. Now, Jasper wasn't just based on my bird knowledge. My first book I did was on moose, and they were doing a documentary on moose called Twig Eater, and they wanted me to come out there and help them find pregnant moose. That was my job for a full month of May, to find pregnant moose in Jasper National Park. Yeah, some crazy opportunities. There I met some really neat organisms like this white-tailed ptarmigan on top of the mountains, and Brewer's blackbirds. And here's an odd job. I was hired, only a 3-day, well, I guess it was a 5-day contract, just I think 2.5 years ago, and 2 years ago actually, and it was to knock on trees with sticks. That was my job for 5 days, well paid too. I think it was $500 per day to do this for a BBC film crew that were trying to film hooded mergansers, which nest in holes in trees. So my job was to try to find a nest for the cinematographers. So I went around for 5 days with a stick and knocking on hollow trees, looking for hooded mergansers. Didn't find any, but had a wonderful time doing it. It's crazy, some of the opportunities. I was hired as a consultant for a whole year as they built the Algonquin Park Visitor Center, working on the exhibits. my job was twofold: to find backgrounds for the artist to paint for those beautiful dioramas. Can you imagine spending days trying to find the perfect lake to paint? And Kevin Hockley, this was for Dwayne Hardy, the artist, very talented man. And for Dwayne Hardy, the diorama specialist, who did the mounts of animals and also did the backgrounds like rocky cliffs and so on. My job was to assist him, help him find cliffs to replicate, help him sew up the animals, things like that. Just a wonderful dream job. All because start off with birds. I also like to be competitive when it comes to birds, and I've taken place in many competitions, usually 24-hour ones where you start at midnight, end at midnight. The Werner Cup was one where there were 19 teams, and the area covered was from Montreal toward Pickering, up north through Algonquin Park, and then down to the Great Lakes. And in that 24 hours, you can go anywhere you want with your team, but you had to end up in Ottawa at midnight that day and hand your list in. And we won, I think twice we won. No, 3 times we came first, I guess. And in the year 2000, we had 183 species in that 24-hour period. And that's some pretty talented people on that team. Anyway, and of course, then this knowledge of birds has led me to teaching at Carleton University. And I haven't got a master's or a PhD, but it does go to show that you can have an education that goes beyond the academic situation, where you can be self-taught as well. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. You don't have to have credentials behind your name, as long as you really work hard in your area, have a passion for it, and develop the knowledge on your own. Here's a funny episode. I always bring specimens to class, as those people on campus know. And I was carrying this Wolverine. That's not a photoshopped image. That's me going to lecture with the Rideau River behind me. But I had this stuffed Wolverine, had a cement base. It was really heavy, probably weighed about 500 kilograms. Well, maybe not that much, but it was pretty heavy. And I was carrying it across campus. And I went by the river building. They call it now something else, don't they? I forget what name it is, but Witchcraft or something. I was going by that building, and a reporter was in that building and saw me going by and ran outside with her camera saying, "Can I photograph you for our newspaper? You know, it looks pretty interesting." So I said, "Well, sure." And then she said, "Is that a fisher?" And I was quite impressed because fishers are relatives of wolverines. I said, "No, but you're very close. I'll give you a clue, Hugh Jackman." And she said, "Oh, it's a werewolf." And then she lost all credibility with me. Oh dear. Anyway, campus itself is spectacular for birds. And, you know, pre-COVID times, we had bird walks every Tuesday morning. And here's a few of the moments from those bird walks. Wood ducks in the canal, Bohemian waxwing over the experimental farm eating buckthorn berries, a female cardinal over at Fletcher Wildlife Garden eating sumac, a great blue heron snatching a white sucker out of the Rideau, a European starling over again at the experimental farm eating berries off a tree. And by the way, those who've taken my course know this, but for those that haven't, the starlings are famous birds. Mozart, the famous composer, had a pet starling. And when that starling died, he had a procession, a funeral procession in his backyard with dignitaries there. And he actually wrote a piece of music. He composed a piece of music for his pet starling. Always found it fascinating to think that while Mozart was composing, his starling was decomposing. I apologize for that. Okay, anyway. One thing about looking at birds that really has hit home with me, Roger Torrey Peterson, who was the individual who developed the first portable field guide for identifying birds. And from his field guide to the birds, I think it was done in 1934, came forth a whole series of books on, you know, field guide to reptiles, amphibians, wildflowers, and so on. You can carry these books in the field and identify them. And in one of his interviews, he stated that perhaps the most rewarding byproduct of birding is how your senses get sharpened. You can become more aware, pardon me, of the world around you and regard for life. That's so true. And so I started off with birds only, ignoring everything else. But if I had to get absorbed also by the plants around me, and became much more aware of the connection between wildflowers and butterflies and all living things. And so birding certainly has opened the doors for me to all these other worlds, including moose as well. And by the way, this knowledge of animals did lead me to doing a TV show for 1 year, Wild by Nature. And strange set of circumstances, I wanted a real TV show on nature where there was no cut in stock footage. It was all shot in the wild with wild animals. And what I saw, everybody else saw. That was it. And the producer, who was an American, loved the show. And then she found she had terminal cancer and had to leave. Her replacement wanted to have stock footage put in. I refused to, so the show was not renewed. So you have to have principles. Sometimes they cost you, but you have to have principles. Anyway, all the animals I deal with, like this bear, are wild. And you meet a lot of animals when you're out in the wild. Some are bearable, some are unbearable. I don't use repellents. I don't know if it shows or not, but perhaps it explains a lot of my behavior, but I don't use repellents. And I found I've gotten used, I don't like them, of course, of being bitten by insects, but I've gotten used to it and don't react to them. I don't swell up or anything. But I thought after all those years of being exploited by biting insects, I may as well exploit them. So I began to photograph biting flies on my hand, and which I can't do right now. My right hand is out of commission for 6 months to a year, but it'll come back. But there's a black fly, which has incredible mandibles for slicing your skin and putting in anticoagulants. Mosquito, of course. Some of these were hard to take, quite literally. Deer fly with spectacular eyes. How about a horse fly? Looks like Bono, just incredible shades on that animal. Probably the one that hurt the most, though, to photograph was a stable fly. And so I'm still trying to get other biting insects. We all have to have hobbies, right, of some sort. So here's a good one for you. Get out there and photograph biting flies. Maybe use somebody else's arm, though. Anyway, I was asked to talk a bit about photography, and I don't like talking about photography. I love talking about nature. To me, the camera is only a tool to capture a moment, and people will say, what a great photograph. It's not a great photograph, it's a great moment in nature. I'm only capturing what is there, and I think nature is the master creator, not the person behind the camera. But here's what I don't photograph usually are nesting birds, unless the nest is accessible like this, where you're not bothering the birds. Many photographers will bend back branches, cut off things in the road to get a clear shot of a nest. That destroys the environment around the nest. Cliff swallows make mud nests on building sides, including on campus. We saw some nests on the architectural buildings. You're not disturbing the bird when it's inside the nest. Pardon me, I love natural nest sites. There's an eastern phoebe nest right here on the Barron Canyon Cliff. And to me, that's the best way to photograph, a nest in the natural settings, not affecting the birds. A little bit closer view with a larger lens on the camera. In terms of when to photograph, you can photograph all day long, but at certain times of day, the lighting is more dramatic, especially early in the morning and later in the day when the sun's on an angle. You do get dramatic effects. And here's an example. Here's a beaver at midday about to slap its tail. Interesting image. But you get the slap backlit, and you get this dramatic contrast of the white water coming up because of the sun to the black background. And I call these beaver art, and you can see how every tail slap is different. Just like snowflakes, they're all different. And so I like to spend time behind a beaver when it's backlit and try to get the spectacular image of the tail slap coming down. Same applies to, say, a common loon doing a dance on the water. So the angle of the sun plays a big role in what the effect is. And backlit gives you these dramatic exposures with water and dark backgrounds. Light can also, front light can highlight things, and the use of the angle of the light and natural shadows behind really is wonderful. These aren't fake black backgrounds. These are shadows that are there caused by trees. So you find the angle where your subject is lit up by the sun, but the background's all black. These are not difficult to achieve at all. Same for wildflowers, natural shadows behind. That's Grassa parnassus, spectacular guiding patterns for insects and so on. Same for the spatulate leaf sundew. Again, the dramatic light coming in and a black background that's quite natural from shade. In photographing macro work with flowers and insects, it's really important to be aware of the background. We always tend to focus on the subject, and often the background is forgotten about. By changing the camera angle, you can achieve a background, here's water behind, where it's nice and smooth and not interfering with your subject in the foreground. When you have a bird against water, like a great blue heron, it's very simple to do that. But with macro work, you have to often change the angle. There's a few examples of how a plain background really highlights the subject matter. For many people taking photographs, they think you have to have a full frame image of the animal, crop in or whatever you have to do. Well, these are good portraits. You can certainly do that. And a full frame image of an animal like this, come on, brain, come on, Buckeye. Buckeye, come on. Having a senior's moment. I'm on medication too, pain medication. It's pretty heavy duty. And so I think it's called Buckeye. Forgive me if I get some of these things mixed up. But these are portraits and they're fine in their own right. But that's not the only way to photograph nature. It can certainly be spectacular, but it's often good to capture something in the environment too. And to me, one of my favorite images is this common grackle going after a newly emerged dragonfly nymph right here, coming out of its nymph case, about to transform to the adult dragonfly. And I spent days trying to get this image. And that's part of the idea. Once you know a lot about natural, or know a bit about natural history, you can apply that knowledge. You know, if you know that blackbirds hunt dragonflies at the edge of waterways in early summer every day, just go to the edge of in this case, a bog mat, and look for these blackbirds and look for the dragonfly nymphs and try to get the image. To me, that's the most rewarding thing about photography, is that I do go out sometimes for a walk and just capture images on the fly, but often I have a target in mind. And it's rewarding to look for some specific behavior and do a reasonable job of capturing it. A very quick aside, a funny story about this picture. I gave a talk at an entomological conference a couple of years ago, huge conference. Some of the top entomologists in Canada were in the audience. I showed this image and one of the people yelled out, "Michael, that's not a dragonfly, that's a mayfly emerging." And I said, no, it's a dragonfly. Then one of the top experts in Canada, in North America, called out, "Yeah, it's a mayfly," and he named a species. And I was devastated. Middle of my talk, I was devastated because making a mistake to me is the most horrific thing I could do. And I hate mistakes. And so I was devastated. I finished my talk. I couldn't sleep that night. No matter how much scotch I drank, I couldn't sleep. And about 3 a.m, I got my computer out and put the image on. I thought, I can't be that stupid, that wrong. So I enlarged the image and I saw that I was right. And what happened was there's a sedge blade coming down here behind the abdomen of the dragonfly that makes it appear to have long tails as a mayfly would have. And the fellows didn't see the nymph case here of the dragonfly or the eye size. It is a dragonfly. So I felt so vindicated. And the next morning at breakfast for the conference, I had them announce to everybody that, yeah, Michael was right. We were all wrong. It was a dragonfly. Funny story I'll never forget. Anyway, key thing is with images of nature, a full frame photograph isn't always necessary, or is it even interesting? Often to capture more of the background. Here's a red morph eastern screech owl by some oak leaves. And to me, that's a much nicer image than a full frame view of the animal. Or capturing more of the environment for the setting. Here's a sora type of rail with the Martian habits. Or again, just a moment here, snow falling down on a great growl. But again, it's not full frame. It's a nice, to me, a nice capture of the background around too, and the snow falling. And one of the key elements, I think, in a really nice image is to balance it. There's a thing in art called the rule of thirds that a lot of you have heard of. And that means you break down your view into thirds. At the intersection of the thirds, you'll get a strong focal point. And that's often a good place if you're trying to frame your organism to have it in where the thirds unite or come together. There's a great horned owl on its nest in May last year. Or this white-tailed ptarmigan up in the Jasper on a rock. So there's a rule of thirds. And again, the animals can often be small in the frame. Often the environment around is so interesting that you incorporate the two elements, you get a really powerful image. A savanna sparrow, for example, in this meadow. Again, rule of thirds makes it strong. One of my favorite red-winged blackbird photographs is this one. Bird is tiny here by this beaver lodge, but I find it very powerful. And I think that would make a great jigsaw puzzle. I think it'd be a fantastic jigsaw puzzle. Same as this young male, first-year male summer tanager in a swamp. I also like looking through things, not through people's windows, not that kind of looking through things, but through vegetation. And so you get the blurs around that are in front as well as behind. I find that really interesting. It's a winter wren or a wood thrush. You know, to me, it has the impression of looking through into the animal's surroundings. Or this eastern wolf howling. This is like 2 years ago, I guess, by McManus Lake. I find these very interesting because you're showing the animal hidden, partly hidden in this environment. And that's from a bird walk. And a couple of little quick tips on finding nature. That's one of my fortes, I guess, is being able to perhaps predict or find nature in some cases that are hard to come by. One is looking for nest holes of woodpeckers. And if you go to a tree with a nest hole, could be an old nest hole or a new nest hole, scratch on the tree trunk with a stick. And often the occupant will put its head out. Maybe it's pileated woodpeckers, 2 young ones. Maybe it's a northern saw-whet owl. Here's an adult that poked out of one hole, or the baby saw-whet owl out of another hole. And you don't keep harassing, you don't go there and bang on the tree with sticks for hours on end to get pictures. They stick their heads up there for maybe 30 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes if you're lucky, and take your photographs in and then leave them alone. And life goes on as normal for them. And sometimes there are surprises. That didn't come out to scratching, that just poked his head up. It's a gray tree frog in a cavity. And then also when you're taking photographs of nature, there's a bit of prediction. If you're looking at a woodpecker on a tree, you know it's going to fly eventually. And as soon as the head begins to give the indication it's going to fly, you just start shooting your camera. And if you're lucky, you'll capture an image of a yellow-bellied sapsucker. Wild cherries are an important source of food. And you go to a tree laden with choke cherries, there's going to be animals coming to it. If you go there at daybreak and just wait, you're bound to have birds or maybe an eastern chipmunk come to eat the fruit. So prediction is part of I think the way to not just photograph, but also just to observe nature. Or cardinal flowers. The only pollinator in the world for them is a hummingbird. And so you go to cardinal flowers and go there early in the day for the good lighting and just wait, get set up on the flowers and wait for that moment when the animal arrives. And that's fun. It's like fishing, I suppose. I haven't fished since '85, but fishing, if you have a bobber, you're sitting there waiting for that moment the bobber starts to move. It's like that if you're waiting for an animal to come into a food source. waiting and waiting and waiting. You might spend 8 hours waiting, and maybe you get lucky, maybe you don't. But when you do get lucky and see the animal come in, then it's really exciting. Rewarding as well. And also there's a chance of just good luck. I was photographing mallards on this beaver dam when this moose began to walk toward them in a creek behind. And so I knew if I ran and lay down and got the angle right, I would hope the moose would pass behind the ducks. And that's exactly what happened here. So it's partly luck as well, of course, being in the right spot at the right time, as I was for these otters that seem to be sharing a shocking secret of some sort. Or this fellow's being mischievous and putting some naughty ideas into her head. Who knows what's going on here? Or just good fortune. How about this beaver putting on a COVID mask? You didn't know that beavers wear masks during COVID times, do you? Well, how about that? And the last thing about photography is that, and really, the more you're out in nature, the more you start to appreciate more than the individual components, but the whole experience, and more of the abstract side of life as well. And I'm starting to see more and more of that in the last few years of the abstract part of nature, where beaver swimming through reflections moved by its water swimming movements, or panning with the animal, so you get the animal in focus and the background's blurry. I love that sort of effect. Not hard to achieve. It's a matter of just having your camera follow correctly the motion of the animal. Here's a bald eagle flying up a river going the other direction. So you get this beautiful blur. Or the Swainson's hawk being attacked by a herding blackbird. Just that moment. Again, the blur adds to it. Or the background moving in the animals. No, that's a hovering Aeshna umbrosa, the shadow darn, or the dragonfly, hovering over the water that's flowing behind it. Or these whirligig beetles, where many are moving, swirling around, the rest are not. Or just stills of a lichen-covered cliff face. These are rock tripe. Starting to really appreciate. And then you see the abstracts in the animals, where here's a ant colony. The winged adults that are flying off to mate are being helped by the helpers, and creating your own abstracts. Okay, now a couple of quick tips on attracting nature. One is how to call things in. There's pishing, psh, 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 that works to call small birds in, guaranteed or your money back. And the other is squeaking. And squeaking is a powerful tool. I did a little video clip for Valentine's Day that I'll play for you. I think it's 2 minutes long. Play for you now on
Happy Valentine's Day.
Squeaking.
And for those of you who know how to kiss, then this will be a piece of cake, this lesson on how to squeak for birds and for weasels and coyotes and that sort of thing. Squeaking, also called squealing by some, is making a sound that sounds like an injured animal, maybe an injured rabbit. And these calls lure in predatory birds and mammals that think they have an easier prey to capture. So it involves 2 fingers and your lips, the key part of Valentine's Day right here as well. So you basically give your fingers a very noisy kiss, like this. Now, some people use the back of the fingers. If you do use the back of your knuckles, often a little bit of a lick first by yourself or your favorite person will help. So get them a bit wet.
Oops. And that's enough of an idea. But here are some of the animals I've squeaked in. This coyote, for example, this red fox, this fisher, young fisher, and countless owls, great horned owls, barred owls, and so on. How about this mink one winter on a bird count in Algonquin? They come, they look at you, and they leave, just like my earlier dates did in high school. Anyway, and yeah. And so this wolf pup also squeaked in one time, and the adult came in behind it. What a magical moment that was. So squeaking is a really powerful tool. You can also imitate sounds that the animals make individually. So otters, for example, are very curious, and they snort when they see something of interest. If you snort back like that, they usually come in. And I just love these animals. They are so interesting. Other animals during the mating season, you can give the calls. In the case of moose, a female love call will draw bulls in. And I've had many experiences with bulls. That's from last fall. I called a bull in at daybreak, and it was beautiful early morning lighting, that magical lighting. And it came up to me, looked at me, and thought I wasn't worthy of his attention, and then went to the pond and swam across. But there's a moment where he enters the water. Just a beautiful, fortunate moment in my part. And wolves, I love wolves. They're one of the most elusive animals and really hard to see and certainly to get pictures of. But they answer back to howls that impersonate their howls and that mimic their howls. And I've had good fortune, but I tell you, for every probably 20, 30 attempts, I might get lucky and get a couple images, but it's those images. And perhaps with the highlight of all the animals I called in were these 3 wolf pups, where after a couple of days and going in at daybreak and trying to get near the pack, finally howling from a spot. I actually stood in the water behind a dead tree, and having a very powerful lens, I was able to get a good distance from the animals, but I howled and these animals howled back. And that remains to be one of the most exciting, memorable moments of my time out in nature. But that's the beauty of it. You know, there's myriad experiences to be had whenever you go out. There's no limit. And whether it's wolves or whether it's a butterfly on goldenrod or whatever, there's never nothing to see. And I always find it really interesting when I meet somebody who's walked a trail and I say, "What have you seen?" And they say, "Nothing." I thought, you poor person, you must be dumb, deaf, and blind to go on a trail in nature and see nothing. Come on now. Gosh, all you have to do is learn how to look, and there's so much to see. And so part of my accessories now include binoculars, camera gear, and a soulmate. Nothing better than a soulmate to share life with. So that's it for the presentation. My little arm is starting to act up a little bit, so I'm going to raise it and elevate it, and I can stop screen sharing now, I think, to get back to the question part of this presentation. There, good.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Michael. It was a great talk. If anyone here is listening and you're in first or second year, I recommend planning your elective accordingly to take the natural history courses. I'm sure this is like a small teaser for what you can
What's
expect.
amazing to me? It's only 4:36 Eastern Standard Time, and I've never given a talk less than an hour in my life. So I set a record. I was asked to give a talk for half an hour, and I thought impossible. And because I can go on, as everybody knows, my students know, I can go on for days on a topic. And so this is good because you wanted half an hour or so, and you wanted to have time for questions if there were any. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you might have right now.
Exactly. Well, thank you for being here, at least for the hour. We really appreciate it. And you're right. We'll move on to the Q&A. Just to let you know how it's going to go. We don't want people to talk over each other, like, sorry, you go ahead, you go ahead. We'll do the raise hand feature on Zoom. So if you click on reactions on the bottom tab, you can raise your hand. If you have a question, please do. I can see them in order. You can unmute yourself once I call your name and ask your question. But first, I know Nada is urging to ask a question first, so we'll start off with Nada.
Thanks, Adib. So we all are huge fans here of Algonquin Park, and I know that you are too. If you could suggest one trail to go birding in Algonquin, which would it be?
Wow, that's a great question. Now, there are 2 major parts to Algonquin. There's the eastern part you access from near Petawawa that brings you to the Barron Canyon. And I love that part of Algonquin. It's so different than Highway 60. But most of the walking trails are on Highway 60. So to recommend one, I'll recommend one for both sides of Algonquin Park. The Barron Canyon Trail is so-so for birds, but it's a spectacular view of the canyon. However, peregrine falcons nest in that canyon, and they nest, we found the nest, Britta and I found the nest 2 years ago, and it's below one of the lookouts where you actually stand. You cannot see the nest, it's hidden. But if you stand there, go there early in the morning and spend half a day there, you'll probably see the birds bringing food, the adult bringing food to the female in the nest, or both birds bringing food to the young. And so, and also in the canyon, there are northern birds like yellow-bellied flycatchers and the Canada warblers nest there. Just an interesting group of birds that you might see. So that's my favorite East Side Trail, Barron Canyon Trail, for certain things, but certainly the dramatic view of the Barron Canyon makes it worthwhile. And the ravens are there, and you might see eagles flying by and so on. On Highway 60, probably one of the better trails for mixed habitat is the Mizzy Lake Trail. It's a long trail, but there's a shortcut to it. If you go up the Barron or the Arrow and Pines Road to where the railway bed crosses, and you turn right on that, you'll come to a chain, you park to the side, and there on the railway bed, you're walking on the northern part of the Mizzy Trail, and it goes through spectacular beaver ponds and boggy areas and nice mixed habitats. And there are northern birds like spruce grouse and blackback woodpecker, and then many nesting warblers too. Another good spot is the Booth Rock Trail. Booth Rock Trail has high cliffs, so you get great spectacular images. And last year, Britt and I found peregrine falcons that did nest on that cliff too, for the first time ever. And then as you come off the high part down to the old railway bed again, it's great along there for a number of birds. So I would say Mizzy Lake Trail, especially the north end, you can access and cheat on the trail by going up there directly, and Booth Rock Trail. And then on the other side of Algonquin, the Barron Canyon Trail is a great spot. But just walking around, even around Grand Lake, is a great spot too for seeing a diversity of birds.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, by the way, I did a book called The Explorer's Guide to Algonquin Park. I wanted to call it The Naturalist's Guide to Algonquin Park, but the publisher wanted a more general term for the title years ago. And the 4th edition of it just came out last week. And it does have highlights of all the key species of birds and mammals that people go to see in Algonquin. Give you some of the spots where I found over the years, one of the best spots for calling wolves or hearing wolves, or for seeing certain birds like spruce grouse and so on. And so that's a good one to get a hold of for that, or just to photocopy, or just scan whatever, photograph. So you have to buy one. You can just get access to one from the library and see where to go to see things. Just a funny thing about that book, I'll tell you a quick aside. The book came out in 1994, I think. And I had a book signing for it in the Algonquin Visitor Center. The first edition was a small black and white thing. And about midday, in came a family, all excited, 2 or 3 kids and a couple of parents, as most families have. But they came in and had their little book and said, "We want you to sign it because we saw our first wolf ever thanks to you." And I said, "Well, where'd you see it?" And they said, "Well, in your book, over on the eastern side of Algonquin, near the Barron Canyon, you said a good spot to try howling for wolves is kilometer 49.3. At that spot, because there are kilometer markers on the road, so I can use them for identifying features. There's an old road going in off the main road to an old sawmill camp, all gone, but opening there. But often wolves would rendezvous or meet in summertime in there, so good spot." So they drove there, and they found kilometer 49, and they drove up and they parked at 49.3, and a wolf walked out across the road in front of them. I mean, what are the odds of that happening? But 1 in a million probably. Oh, wow, and what a book. and Michael Runtz is speaking right now, a book signing. Let's drive across. They drove 3 hours to get me to sign the book on the day they saw their first wolf. Anyway, so the book works sometimes. It worked in 1994. Maybe it'll work now for you. Anyway, okay, sorry, next question.
I sure hope it does. Thanks, Michael. We'll take the first question from the audience. I have Richard first. If you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hey, can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, fantastic. So first I want to preface this question, Mike, with the fact that I got two huskies in the back and they're still kind of freaking out over your squeaking demonstration. So if you heard any, there you go, right there, right on cue. So I apologize for that. I don't want to detract too much from your time. I hope your injury is going well. This is a bit of a two-parter question. I wanted to ask first, to set the scene, how did you injure yourself? What came to be to?
It's a really stupid thing. I slipped coming out of the bathtub. I fell down on a glass vase, and it severed an artery, almost bled to death, and it cut a bunch of nerves. And so I spent 3 hours in surgery in Toronto, at Sunnyside. Sunnyside's where you go after you die. No, Sunnybrook. And they did some nerve transplants and some magical things. I was very lucky. I had the North American expert on hand nerve operations, Dr. Binhammer, do the work with a team of the two other surgeons. And the prognosis is good that I should regain use of my hand and hopefully all full functions of it. I'm right-handed, so it's a real nuisance. I can't squeak. Well, I can squeak with my left hand, I guess, but holding a camera is not possible now, really, and that will change. So that's how I injured it anyways. And I'm told that from 6 months to a year from now, I should have pretty good use of that hand.
That's good. So, I mean, you're expecting a full recovery to some degree, at least, so you'll be able to get in photograph again.
And the moral of the story is don't take baths. They're terrible, dangerous. I never get injured in the woods, you know, on cliff tops or climbing slopes or whatever. But in a damn bathtub, I slip all over.
That's unfortunate.
I should have made a story, a much more dramatic story involving bears or something, but.
I mean, that's just as dramatic. I wanted to ask, you know, I've been a big fan of yours for, you know, several years now. I'm a fourth-year student. I've taken your, you know, introduction to natural history class. I've taken your natural history of Ontario class and just absolutely love the material. I was pretty devastated when your fourth-year ornithology class wasn't running last year because of COVID. Really broke my heart because I really have one credit left, or half a credit rather left in my minor, and that was where it was going to go, and I'm still holding out. Is there any hope that you're launching your fourth-year ornithology class in 2021 summer, or I guess 2022 summer next year, or is that just
I think we're going to offer it in the fall this coming year.
Oh no, well that's fantastic. Okay, cool. I'll keep that in mind.
Problem is COVID. You know, if we're on campus, it's a go, because it'll go regardless of whether it's in class, but it's got to be in class to be fully enjoyed, because I have this huge collection now of specimens, live mount specimens for teaching, and we have field trips, you know, and so I'm praying that we go live in September, or not live, but back on campus, so we have access to the lab, and we also have field trips. It's a much more intimate experience and better for learning if we're together in one room and then sharing specimens and things like that, as opposed to doing it by distance and only by photographs. But it's better than not at all. So I think it's going to go in the fall, and we'll see whether or not it's on campus. I guess we'll know fairly soon. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed, absolutely. So fingers crossed, absolutely for that. But one last question. You mentioned getting back into the lab, and I'm sure there's a bit of a state of flux, but is there any way we could sit down and meet sometime? Do you have any position for honor students or even volunteers within your labs?
Yeah, for sure. I'm always willing to talk. Because I haven't got a graduate degree, I'm always asking students who want to do a project with me to get a co-supervisor that knows stats and analysis and experimental setups. I'm a naturalist, and I'm not an academic by any means.
Fantastic. Well, I'll do some digging, and I'll send you an email, and hopefully we can get some more details hashed out. Thanks so much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Michael, for answering Richard's questions. We'll move on to the next person in the line. We'll go to Lindsay.
Hello. Thank you.
What a great smile you have, Lindsay.
Oh, thank you. I was laughing the whole time. I find your jokes absolutely hilarious. And
Well, you're 1 in 100. That's fantastic.
It's so funny, and it's so nice to have such a great laugh in these times, and to brighten the day when it's so rainy outside today in Ottawa. So thank you so much for your talk. I wanted to ask, where do you usually like set up when you're bird watching or watching nature? Like, do you hide in branches or find a little shelter, or just stand up and wait?
That's a really good point. If I'm going after something elusive like wolves, I don't use blinds usually. Very rarely I use blinds. I don't like being confined, and also if I'm doing wolves, especially, I'm often tracking them for some distance, maybe a couple kilometers or so, and so I don't want to carry equipment with me like that. But usually I use natural cover, and the key thing is, a lot of people think you have to wear camouflage, and you see these people that are dressed head to toe in camouflage. I never wear camouflage. I never have. I wear earth tone colors, and that's really important. But the biggest thing is movement. And people who wear camouflage are often moving all around, and they're seen as easily by a wild animal as anybody who's not wearing camouflage. It's more your cryptic behavior, and that's the key thing, is to stay really motionless. And there's nothing more enjoyable to me than, say, going to a beaver pond before daybreak and just sitting. One of my recent books was on beavers, so I spent countless hours at beaver ponds. But you go before daybreak, and it goes for any habitat, whether it's a beaver pond or if you're in the forest with a view. You try to find a view of an open area where you might encounter the animal or call the animal in, and you do get hidden behind whatever cover you can, often maybe the base of a tree or behind a tree, and you wait, and it's magical because you're there before daybreak, and then first light comes, and it's never a sudden change from dark to light. It comes in almost in sheets of light. And it's like going to a stage play where you're there in a theater, and you know how the lights come on gradually or the curtains come up, and then the lights come on and there's motion. That's exactly how nature is. Every habitat is a stage, and it's the most magical experience, because then you start seeing all the players come out and do their thing. And maybe the one actor you're after makes an appearance, maybe it doesn't, but you never leave disappointed, because you've seen so much in the time you're there, just being really still and watching and listening. It is so magical. And I think for every school, you know, instead of creating rooms with computers for the kids to go play games, whatever, get them out on a field trip, which are now becoming scarce as hen's teeth. Get them out and take them to a beaver pond or something at daybreak, and make them sit still and watch. And that could change their life so much, because once, especially a kid is exposed to the magic of nature, then a whole lifetime of enjoyment lies ahead, not just that moment they're in, but getting out every time. And that, to me, is a key for a really healthy life for anyone, is to be exposed more to nature. And there are books written on this, how nature and our brains work together. And because we are part of the natural world, we just sort of drifted away from it physically and often intellectually. And we need that connection back. And I think that's the most important thing, is to get out there and see nature. But that's a long answer to your question about hiding, but that's the key thing, is not moving and learning how to be really still.
I couldn't agree more. Well said. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very well said. I agree. Thanks, Michael. We'll go to Aiden up next.
Hi, Michael. I was wondering if you had any specific book recommendations. Most of the books that I've come across for learning more about nature and natural history tend to either be field guides or things geared towards young children. Do you have anything that's a bit more?
Yeah, I've got a really good library on natural history, and there are so many. It's incredible. if you asked that question 40 years ago, and of course you couldn't have, you wouldn't be here. But if you had, there weren't many books available. But now there's a wealth of books on everything from insects to moose to wolves to everything. And I could give you 100 different volumes that are worth looking at for the natural history. For example, on mammals, the Museum of Nature put out, I think I might even have it under the computer for elevation here. Britta, you brought that book out. Was there one on? I'm just turning the computer here. Yeah, how about that? No, that's not it. Sorry, that's actually not a very good book under here. But I do have some poor ones in the collection. But it's I think it's a natural history of Canadian mammals, something like that. But it's put up by the Museum of Nature, and that gives you the natural history of each species. It's a really good book. I love books with the term natural history in the title. That says a lot about the book itself. There's one on insects by Steve Marshall from Guelph University called Insect Diversity, I think, in Natural History. And he has one now on these are massive books. He has one on beetles and one on flies also. There's every category now of natural history has really good books on the natural history background. And I'd be happy to recommend some to you, by sending a list. I should create a list, actually, a list of my favorite natural history books and put it, on Carleton's site. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, for sure. Feel free. Also, if you'd like to send it to us, we can send it to all the attendees. Happy to help.
Yeah, I have trouble typing now because I'm right-handed. My fingers don't work. So I use one finger on my left hand, and it is horrendous. So I may not do the list right away for you, but although Britta says there's some way, I'm not a computer person, or am I a technology person? God, I'm a Luddite. But apparently you can get a program where you can speak to the computer and it types for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if my MacBook has that already. Maybe it does, but maybe Britta can. Love, you can do that for me? Okay. She can set up for me. She says, and I'll be sure that. All right. So yeah, I can work on that.
That'll be great. Thank you. We can take the next question from Melissa.
Hi, Michael. Happy to be here today. My one burning question has just been for people like amateur, super amateur naturalists who are just getting out there and kind of like exploding with all this new information. What do you recommend focusing on, especially in the beginning?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I started off by being very narrow and focused. It was birds only. And I was lucky. I started really young. And so, I have many, many years behind me of looking at birds. But yeah, but it's funny. It depends on a person's interests and capability. I know a couple of young people that seem to be looking at almost every genre of nature and absorbing it, and they're incredible. Others just focus on one area. And so I think it all depends on the individual and your own interests and ability to absorb knowledge. But there's nothing wrong looking at everything and not becoming an expert in it, just enjoying what you see. So it's hard to recommend what to do, but often I think for many of us, especially me, looking at one area first and getting familiar with it, then branching off to another area. But it's so hard to ignore so many things that are not in your area of interest when you're out there. And now, holy cow, now there are so many resources out there for identifying things for you. A thing called iNaturalist. I don't know if many of you have seen iNaturalist, but you can put up a picture of something, whether it's a fern or a frog or whatever, and it gets identified for you. And there's something too on insects. Bug Guide is one. And there's one on plants too. There are a lot of great resources online, which I haven't used because I don't like using computers. I'm really bad that way. And here I am telling you to use them, and I've never actually used them. But apparently they work really well and are highly recommended. So that, yeah, there are. I'm saying for things like birds, there's eBird and so on. And so for someone starting off now, there's so many advantages. and learning what you're looking at through online resources or through books that weren't available when I was young. It's amazing. When I started looking at dragonflies in the 80s, the only book available was Walker's Odonates of Canada and Alaska. And you had to look at the venation on the wings of the dragonflies and, you know, look at the veins in their format to key them out in the book. Well, dragonflies are like birds, they're colorful, different patterns. And now there's a plethora of field guides to dragonflies, including the Algonquin Park one that's really excellent. There's one by Paulson on dragonflies in Eastern North America. And there's a book by a guy named Lamb on damselflies of the Northeast, and it's spectacular. And those are available now, but back when I began to learn dragonflies, I had to look at these beautiful animals, ignore their colors, and look at the wings with a microscope. And it was like, it was not very much fun, but things have changed. And also the genitalia, that was more interesting, but no, I shouldn't say that. Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Yeah, we have one more person have their hand up. We'll go to Melanie.
She's a silent type.
Yeah. Melanie, we can't hear you, even though I saw you unmuted.
Oh. Huh. That's a strange one because she's unmuted. We saw her unmute.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Are we good?
Oh.
Did we figure it out?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Hi. So I took your first and second year course, obviously. And I really enjoy your stories that you tell because they're always great and your adventures you go on. I grew up in North Bay, so I've had a lot of close calls with animals as we lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere. And I just want to know if you have any stories that, you know, where you were like legitimately scared, or if you ever like feared for your safety at any point with some encounters.
Yeah. There certainly have been times. My first book was on moose, called Moose Country, and that came out in 1991, I think. And I worked on the book for 2 years, 89 and 1990. And I called in bull moose during the rut. And back then I had, you know, just starting off in photography. I had a small camera lens. A 200 millimeter was my big telephoto, which for those that take photographs is not very big actually. And those are the days of film where you had to use a tripod to hold the camera up because the ISO was unlike today's freaking cameras where the ISO goes up to 32,000 and some. It was like 25, so it was pretty slow speed. Anyway, it took a lot of technique. And I called bull moose in and had to be very close to photograph them. And several times I was charged by a bull. And once I almost got it, I had to dive in some very thick black spruce, balsam fir tangles and crawl through them and get scratched up and broke my tripod, but survived. So yeah, I guess there was 3 or 4 times a bull moose charged me. And there's nothing more terrifying than having 1,000-pound animal come bearing down on you when you're, you know, a quarter, not even a quarter, like it's 8. Although mind you, there have been more scarier times in recent history. For example, when Trump was president, that was pretty scary.
Oh yeah, definitely worse.
But anyway, it's funny. I respect animals immensely, and there's always some fear, especially if I'm out at night just going through the forest trying to sneak in. I know that these animals are harmless for the most part, really harmless, but still you have this natural heart pounding, you know, feeling when you go through the dark and you're by yourself and going a couple of kilometers in the woods. No, there's only been a few cases. There was a bear once. It was up near, I guess, Timmins, where it was late in the day and I was driving to do some bird surveys. Another great contract for a month where I canoed waterways in the Clay Belt region looking for nesting waterfowl, doing surveys on that. But I came across a female bear and 2 cubs up this big hillside. So I got out of the car and walked over to the base of the hillside to try to get a picture of them. And the female sort of snorted and the cubs climbed up a tree and she charged me then coming down the hill. at a very high speed. Bears can move pretty quickly. And I ran back to the car, Subaru Outback, and I didn't get back in time to get inside. So the bear chased me around the car. And so I'm running around the car with this big female bear, hot pursuit. And normally, there's a bluff charge. They run at you, then go back to the cubs. But she was a little more aggressive, I guess. And finally, I got inside the car door and slammed it. My heart's really pounding. And I wondered where the bear went. Then I felt the car shake, and she was on the back bumper. And then I honked the horn and stuff. And finally, she went back up the hill to the cubs. The next day, I was taking the canoe off the car, and there are these beautiful claw marks right through the plastic bumper. It was a beautiful piece of bear art. And when the car finally died after 465,000 kilometers, I wanted to have the bumper cut off and save that. I thought it was a pretty neat souvenir, but the scrap dealer wouldn't let me do that. So I have the memory. I got a photograph of the bumper, but I haven't got the bumper itself. But that was scary. And those probably, with the bull moose charging and that one female bear charging me, are the moments that that I probably had the greatest amount of respect arise in me for these animals.
Yeah. I guess my only follow-up question would be, do you have any just advice for people to be safe outside?
Yeah, okay, yeah, for sure. The key thing to me is not to wear bear bells, because they scare away everything. I mean, it's just stupid, these bear bells people wear. People have become so afraid to go in the woods. And in reality, it's far more dangerous to walk down a dark street in a city at night than it is to walk in the woods. Like, really, the number of attacks by animals on humans, if you look how many there are, you can probably count on one or two hands each year. And look at the number of people who are killed or shot or stabbed or whatever. Terrible. When I was in waiting for my surgery on this past Friday in Toronto, I'm in the pre-operation room, and there was a young woman, like late teens, early 20s, in the next cubicle there, talking to the nurse before her surgery. And I heard her sad story, and her sad story was her right arm was immobilized. Her left arm had some mobility. She just had the wires off her jaw after 2 months, and there were still gun fragments in her chest. I mean, she had a horrible experience in a city, far worse than I've ever encountered in the wild. And that was done by another human being. So really, in terms of being safe, you are safe in the woods. You are less safe in driving in a car to get to the woods than being inside it. Any advice I have, and I've had countless hours in the woods alone with animals, and not just locally but in remote places too, is if you do feel threatened by an animal, a bear, the best thing to do is to not run, but to back up and make noise, make sure it knows you're there. But of all the encounters I've had, and it spans now over 60 years of being involved with nature, I can count on one hand the times I've been frightened or felt I was in danger. And those are cases where I put myself in the position by trying to photograph a female with cubs late in the day, and by calling in bull moose. Apart from that, zero. So the odds of being, it's not worth worrying about. It's better to go out there and enjoy the experience. And if you really feel, you need some protection of some sort, carry a can of bear spray with you, which I've never done. In Jasper, I was supposed to, because we were tracking pregnant moose, which grizzly bears are also tracking. And for the first couple of days, I obliged the producer. I carried bear spray and bear bangers, these little explosive things you fire off. But after a couple of days, I thought, nah, I'm carrying my tripod, my binoculars, my other camera gear. I don't want to carry more things. So I left them behind. I kept forgetting them, which may not have been a wise thing to do, because people have been attacked by grizzly bears. But again, those attacks are very few and far between. So I was foolish and I didn't bring them with me. But if grizzly bears are a different animal than black bears are, And I would say just if you feel uncomfortable, bring along a can of bear spray. But apart from that, no, don't worry about them.
All right, thanks a lot.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. I'm sure, I mean, if I had the time, I would ask like 100 questions, but I'm sure other people have other commitments. So we'll move on to almost the last part of our event, which is pretty exciting. I'm sure some people are waiting for it. So we're gonna do, oops. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So we're gonna do the draw for the book. And in short, published in 2018 to coincide with Algonquin Park's 125th anniversary, this full color photographic testimonial is a celebration of many plants and wildlife found within its protected borders. So we have all the emails for the people who showed interest in winning the book.
This is pretty fancy, my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if the person is not present, we will run it again, right? So if the email belongs to you, please speak up, right? Here we go.
This is really something. You see this lovely, put a spinning wheel up with the names of the people on it. It's really cool. This is really, we must learn how to, oh, you missed it. But, well, it was a wheel with all the names and they spun it.
I'm gonna ask if we can do it again if the person who this email belongs to is not here. Last call. All right. I can't see the chat, so if not, I can keep an eye. All right, so we will do it again. If you'd like to show your wife.
Oh yeah, she just went away. Go ahead.
All right.
You do it again, Berta.
And we have a winner, Sarah. If this email belongs to you, please speak up. No, we're gonna spend it spinning wheels for the night. All right.
Okay, you go do it again, hon.
Let's try again.
There's the wheel with all the names on it. Come on, Rosie, I can see you.
No, I don't want to be seen.
They saw you in photographs already.
Yeah, but that's photographs.
Yeah.
And
Really cool.
It is.
Sergi,
Cool.
are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good.
Well, congratulations. You've won Mike's book, Algonquin Wild. So please send us a small note via text or an email, and we will get the book sent to you by the publisher.
Yes, it's a great pleasure. I can't wait to read it.
Are you a student on campus, Sergi, or?
Yes, Professor. Yeah, I'm currently in your second year course.
Oh, good, because if all goes well, I'll be able to sign your book for you next fall.
Oh, perfect. That would be an honor. I'll definitely.
There you go.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, unfortunately, this brings it to a wrap. I would like to thank you, Michael, so much. I'm sure this is a critical recovery time, but you took the time out of your day to be with us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Is there any final notes you'd like to tell us before we all head our way?
No, I just hope that everybody stays healthy, that this damn COVID virus gets, put back in its place. And so I hope you all stay healthy and hope you all get a chance to get outside more and really look closely at nature and enjoy the benefits of being in the wild and let it nurture you.
For sure. We'll take it to heart. Thanks, Michael. And on behalf of Nada and myself and the whole PCOCC team, thanks everyone for joining us, and stay tuned on our social media and website for more events. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Michael, again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much to the club for hosting this. And thank you so much, Michael. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
You're welcome, Josephine.
Thank you so much.
Looking
That
forward
was
to the
awesome.
Christmas bird count, Mike.